Good morning. Over the last few weeks, we have talked about structural care and equity. Today's where those two topics come together in the form of pay. Today, we're going to be talking about how pay interacts with our organizational values, how pay contributes or does not contribute to equity in the field, and how thinking carefully and strategically about pay structures can build healthier organizations. Today, we're talking about how to apply our organizational values to the topics of pay. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds. My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Good morning, everybody. I am Peta Blakely. I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Cynthia and Rebecca. Good morning.
Hi.
Good to see you both. I want to welcome our viewers around the world, particularly our listeners in Australia. Thank you for joining us, and please let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. So over the past year, we have had a lot of conversations about budgets, and budgets being the place where an organization operationalizes its values. Payroll is the biggest part of the budget for a lot of organizations. So let's talk about advancing our organizational values through payroll, and particularly pay equity.
Can I just say, I'm writing this down. Peta, that was a great sentence, that budgets is where organizational values surface. You didn't say it like that. You said it much better, but they get played out with the designing of.
So we go from talk to action.
Yeah. I love that. So, but it's not just budget. So we do talk about pay equity a lot. That is a topic that a lot of nonprofits are talking about right now, right? But it's not just pay equity. It is the right thing to do, but it's also about bringing it up a notch. And so what we've seen in the past, in our history nationally, is that there's always been a fight for equal pay. So we remember when World War II was happening and women were joining the workforce and taking the place of the men who had gone out to war. There was legislation that was passed that a woman that replaced a man would earn a similar salary. But once that was over, the fight for equal pay was not, right? And so women were fighting for equal pay for similar positions and similar roles. And it wasn't until 1963 that President Kennedy signed into legislation the Equal Pay Act. So why is this important? Because we know today that women still earn at least 20 to 25 cents less per dollar than men. So it didn't work. Well,
and women of color earn less than that.
Yes. Oh my God, I found a statistic that Black and Latina women lose $1 million in their lifetime earnings compared to their male counterparts. And I thought that was interesting.
And this is when they are doing a comparable job. So let's also talk about some of the ways in which women of color tend to do different jobs. And then those jobs are paid less than.
Can we bring Maya's comment up? You're gonna love this. Sorry, this is hysterical. She says, "Good morning. How are you? I'm a loyal Coffee Time with Masterminds fan, and I'm tanning the rooftop of my cruise. Welcome to Coffee Time."
That is loyalty. Thank you so much.
That's really cool. I do have to say, if I was on a cruise, I'd probably still be sleeping, but that's me.
And nobody deserves a cruise more than her.
Yes.
Thank you,
Maya. So you were saying, Peta, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so there are differences in the jobs that some people do. And one of the things that we have talked about over and over is how important it is to have people who represent marginalized groups doing certain types of work, especially around those groups, right? And then, how those jobs can sometimes end up being underpaid. And that creates issues, not just for the people doing that work, but for the entire field. So one of the really great examples that Laura Peril brought us was that the early education teachers who teach the 4-year-olds have low wage, poorly paid jobs with no job security and no benefits, while the public school teachers who are teaching the 5-year-olds have good salary jobs with great stabilities and great benefits. That's an equity issue, right?
It is. It is. It is big time. There's also in the law, some of the states have adapted this law. I mean, this is why legislation is important, because it then it then leads into other legislative action. And there's some states who are now redesigning this idea of being paid equally for the same work, and they're using the term similar work, and it's really an assessment of skills and competencies as it relates to the role. So there's a nuance there that I'm sure the lawyers are all over, but it keeps getting adapted, which is good. I mean, this is a good thing.
Yeah, it's an important thing to think about.
So why do we still have this issue? Why are we still talking about it?
Why are we still talking about this? I read this really great phrase the other day. Mission exploitation.
I love these phrases.
Peter. I know, I love it.
We should make a book. Rebecca, we should make a book, Peter's quotes.
Well, it's true.
I did not coin this term, but I think it's brilliant, and I really think that it captures a lot of the issues that we have talked about in the context of self-care and structural care and some of the other hardships of working in the mission-based field. And this is this thinking that the work that we do is really, really important. And we are therefore morally obligated to do it no matter what, right? No matter how poorly we're paid, no matter how many hours we're working, because it's so critically important. And yes, but that dramatically contributes to people burning out, right? People being mentally and physically unwell, or to creating situations where individuals can't participate because they're not able to work 20 hours a day for some reason, right? Low pay contributes to people who have student loans to pay or have family support to support not being able to do these jobs. And so the field remains dominated by people who might not have lived experience of the issues that you're working on, right? And that, again, perpetuates inequality. And it does the field harm, right? It forces people out. It maintains a certain level of churn that is in itself expensive to organizations, expensive in terms of what it costs to replace a worker, lost productivity as you are training a new worker, and the lack of a really skilled, experienced workforce to take on leadership roles, right? It's going to perpetuate this situation that working in mission-based organizations is a little inferior to working in our for-profit.
You're right on. It's this idea that it is inferior. And you said something that sparked a response, but I don't remember.
I have a scenario that I've seen come up a lot throughout my, I guess you call it tenure in nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
Is that I come into the entry-level job, excuse me, and I have a very low base entry-level salary. And if I want to climb the ranks, I have to further my education. Now I'm coming out of school with all of this debt, my first job, I'm really excited and eager. and the organization may or may not give you tuition assistance. So
Yeah.
now I'm accruing another $60,000 in debt in the hopes that I
Mhm.
can climb the ranks if someone who's been there forever leaves.
Yeah.
And it requires maybe an internship, which I can't do at work, right? So I'm working 40,
Mhm.
50 hours a week, talking about that burnout, right?
Right.
Now I'm faced with I want to go a little bigger, but I can't do my internship there. So now what do? I'm choosing between being able to climb the ranks, further my education, and keep the job that I love, that I'm in, that I have a vision for myself in. And that
Mhm.
comes up a lot. It's almost impossible to do that, to
Right.
make that successful. And when we're talking about pay equity, I also think the flexibility and the benefits that come along with roles also plays into pay equity. What do you think of that? What's
Yeah.
your thought there?
Yeah. I mean, that is a really good point that, pay is not, um, we have to consider like the entire package, right? Pay is a major way that we compensate people for working in our organizations. But there are other benefits in tuition remission, any kind of professional development. So often organizations are just not focused on it, have absolutely no budget for professional development. And that holds people's careers back, holds the organization back because those workers aren't growing in their positions.
Yeah. I tell
And
you, there are a lot of negative things that occurred during the pandemic or as a result, but there are also some really positive things. And I think the
Mhm.
Great Resignation is an eye opener. Also, I've been talking to a lot of nonprofit leaders, and their staff burnt out very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yep.
And before the show, Rebecca was asking, like, where are people going? What I heard over and over again is that when staff were resigning during the pandemic, they were leaving the industry, which
Yes.
to me is a clear signal of burnout and just going to do something else. And I ran into someone the other day who does party management, big nonprofit, felt undervalued. Turned out the
Yep.
individual has a degree in digital communications, and now he's working at a university, managing their digital
Right.
stuff, whatever that is, right? And so, wow, wow. And that's the difference, right? Where before it may have been a small group of people who were unsuccessful through
Mhm.
legislation and it took decades and decades and decades. Now, what we are seeing is an entire movement. People are fed up. And am I crazy? But McDonald's is like so proud of hiring people at $15 an hour. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
sure, that's a big deal for you, McDonald's, but we could do a little better.
I mean, it just shows you that the fight for 15 has been going on so long that by
I
the time we got to 15, folks really should have been making $30 an hour. Right.
I
It's a step in the right direction.
you
But
know,
it,
one
I think for a long time, the the not-for-profit industry, and I deliberately put those words together, have counted on workers' dedication to the issue,
know.
to keep people in the field. And this
Mm,
notion that, we are really competing with all of the other potential ways that people could spend their time and energy is going to be a pretty dramatically different way to think, right?
I
This
think
is,
Rebecca wanted to say
yeah,
something.
yeah.
what's really interesting is with all of the conversations that are going on around equity, race equity, there's a lot of new jobs being created in terms of roles that never existed before that contribute to fair hiring practices, to equity in pay, and to a lot
Mhm.
of different opportunities. And I think that's really exciting. And I can't wait until we see the end of 5 years from now to see how those new roles, those new responsibilities that have been created, um, have made a difference. I think that is really going to be telling. And it's something okay, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to suspect that we're going to say, why didn't we think of that sooner? We could have made so many changes, so many differences earlier. We could have reduced people's struggles so much more if we just thought of this sooner. So I'm putting that out there with my imaginary crystal ball. I think it's fantastic. And what are we going to learn from all of this? One of the things that we do in grant writing all the time is when we answer questions about the roles within the grants, one of the hardest things to answer is, how does this role contribute to the impact of the overall program or project, right? And if we just answered that question outside of grants and did that as just a regular part of our organization's infrastructure, I think that we would probably address the pay equity concern a lot sooner and a lot more often than just answering that when we had to.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. We don't spend enough time, and this sort of harkens back to a conversation we had a few weeks ago about job descriptions and, like getting them out and treating them as living documents.
Yeah. Oh my God. We pride ourselves, or we aim for this show to also be a resource for nonprofit leaders. And I have to tell you, Google pay equity, and there are lots of tools out there about how you can ensure that you are in an organization that's practicing equity.
Mhm.
And there are audit tools. And one of the recommendations that I read, which I thought was really interesting, is making sure that the job description matches the pay. Because what happens in nonprofits is that we tend to do more than what's written on that document. And if you're there long enough, your job starts to change. And if you have a great and astute leader, that person is paying attention and starts to adjust your salary, maybe even changes your title. But if that does not happen, then you're being paid for something you were hired to do, and now you're doing higher level work, or you've expanded your responsibilities. So, really auditing job descriptions at least annually was a recommendation that I thought was simple, no cost, and everyone can do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I just Googled. Let's see if we can share. This will be interesting for the first time to see if we could share one of our tabs on Googling pay equity, because you're absolutely right. Let's see what comes up here. Courtesy of Google, giving that little copyright, but 7 steps to effective pay equity, building pay equity into your culture, policies, and practices, how to identify and fix pay equity, why it matters, and what employers must know to comply. I mean, really, this is showing us there's no excuse not to address this. And even if you don't have the tools and resources at your disposal right now, you could write a grant for that, right? Or you could just learn from some of these articles that are posted. Yeah, there's really no excuse.
So many organizations are going to say, well, we're poor, we don't have enough money. This is
I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Help me with the response, because I hear that all the time.
Yeah. So, Rebecca, what do you say to organizations who are like, well, we just don't have that money, or funders aren't paying for it?
Yeah.
Well, again, I think it goes back to prioritizing what's important to your organization. And what's important is, what are the needs of the community that you serve? And if you aren't retaining and training and really stewarding the professional development of your employees, then you're not making that investment in equitable contribution to your organization. And so what I believe is that we prioritize what we search funding for. And there's a reason why funders say that 5 to 25% can cover overhead, so turning your lights on, paying your electric bill, etc., whereas the rest should go directly to the impact upon the community. So it's just a matter, I think, of prioritizing and diversifying your funding portfolio to find those funds.
Yeah, and funders recently have been even more flexible. Is that a fair thing to say? Like now is the time.
They have done so much, funders. They have eliminated the need to complete reports because the work outside is just, it's very stressful out there for nonprofits, right? And I don't necessarily just mean the work that case managers are doing or home visitors are doing. I mean, the clients they're serving are under such stress and duress in certain situations, and it's putting that pressure on the nonprofit employees. And you have to have the supports in place. So not only do we need to be looking for funding for equity in pay and professional development, but we also need to be looking for structural care, for all of the other elements that support our employees. And I believe that pay is just one piece of that pie. It's all encompassing, because you're going to see that mass exodus of people from the field going to where they're being treated better or feel like they have more support.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't. I'm so tempted to bring in, and this could be another show, the issue of health insurance, right? Because I feel like we almost cannot talk about pay without also understanding the impact of health insurance costs to one's pay. And one of the things the nonprofits started to do, health insurance goes up almost 20% every year. Like, somebody needs to do something about that. That's crazy. And what nonprofits have begun to do is share that cost with the employees. So if you think you're making, or if your employer says you're making $35,000, but your insurance premiums are $12,000 a year, plus they don't allow you to add on your family, right? It's only for the employee, which is another strategy that companies are using. You are talking about spending an enormous amount of money on your health insurance. That has to end.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But I think that's what contributes to the pay situation.
Mm-hmm.
In state and federal grants and a lot of municipal grants, funders will pay 100% of benefits if that position ties into that program. So, and that's not in every case. I don't want to mislead anyone to thinking we can just get all of our benefits paid through their funding, but they will contribute a significant portion of it. So if you, again, go to diversifying your portfolio, have some private foundation funding, but also have some of that state, federal, and municipal support as well. That's where you're going to fund those harder to fund elements of a position or a role within your organization. So really rely on other sources of funds. The other component that I've seen a lot is when organizations are looking to hire individuals in certain positions, we calculated benefits at 0.73%, I believe, of any role. And so when you're looking at a job that's, and I'm not doing the math here right now, but when you're looking at a job that pays the employee's paycheck $60,000, but the actual role to keep that employee employed with benefits and everything else maybe is more like 80 or 90,000, the organization is taking on the challenge of raising $90,000 to $100,000 for that employee. And so more discussion has to be had about what is the true cost of employees to an organization, and how much do we have to raise to support all of that employee's salary, not just what's getting paid to that employee. And a little more explanation to the people in those roles, I think, would be helpful in having everyone understand what it actually entails to hire someone and to sustain that position.
I think when, the sustaining the position is a great way to think about it, right? I mean, the salary is not just the salary. Let's just assume that not just to sustain, but to have that worker be thriving in our organization is going to be their salary and this whole, constellation of supports that we've talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
It is appropriate time off, is appropriate health care, right? Is all of those supports. Is making sure that the job description fits into 40 hours a week or whatever is reasonable in your organization.
But that's why you see positions that should be full-time are cut off right at 30 hours, because in the organization, 32 hours or more is considered full-time, which with that comes benefits. And I think I completely understand that. I don't necessarily believe that we have to be doing that any longer. You
Yeah.
know, it's interesting because I'm in the part of raising the funds to support the sustainability. I also see the pain that comes with that from an organization's perspective of, how can we really do this, without funding? And there is so much funding out there to address these very things we're talking about today.
Mm.
Funders have not only made exception to reporting, to other elements to make funding easier for organizations to obtain, but they've also opened up more opportunities for funding under different priority areas. You just have to really be able to look for them, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
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 Excuse her.
I'll also tell you, I'll leave with this. There are some states who are really looking at this seriously. So I know in the state of California, they now require pay equity reports. Companies have to report annually their salary structures. There are other states that are allowing for organizations and nonprofits to do a self audit. And if they find gaps, they're not being punished for the gaps if they do something about it. But that is giving organizations permission to explore what are your pay gaps and what issues are happening without the fear of retaliation. So states are getting serious. They're getting really, really serious about this. And it's just a matter of time before everybody is due a report. I don't want to be misleading though. We still have this issue, right? Even with all the legislation, even with what everybody is
Yeah,
doing,
it's still an issue.
still have this problem. And that needs to be.
And, one of the things that remember last year, Anne came on, we talked about the survey that FIO had done of nonprofit leaders.
Yes.
And, one of the findings in that survey that was really interesting to me was, the field was struggling. This is, 2020. There was so much uncertainty. There was so much need, and renewed focus on equity across a lot of axes. And the respondents, I was concerned that the respondents were going to say, like, we don't have time for that right now. We've got to put these fires out. And they did. And they said, hey, in this crisis is an opportunity. And since we're reorganizing and rethinking, let's come back better and stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that is really encouraging. And here is, one of the areas that we can really look at and do a whole lot better, right?
Yes.
And the war for talent, as you've called it, is probably the encouragement that we need right now.
It's hurting everyone. People are understaffed, and this is not the time to be understaffed.
No, there is so much work to be done.
God.
It's funny. People will say grant writing is competitive. I believe everyone's your neighbor in your space because you never know when a collaborative opportunity may come up for you. So if you look at people as though they're your competition, they're probably not going to become a collaborative partner, and you may miss an opportunity. And when I'm listening to you both sharing, and there's so much that we can learn from other organizations who are taking the lead in these areas. Because a lot of times we hear organizations say, and I believe you mentioned this earlier, Peta, they don't have the resources or they don't have the money for that. Or maybe you had said that, Cynthia. But, if you can learn reading the articles we took a peek at, if you could observe and find another organization to mentor you, then you can find more funding to do that. And if you're not ready with the tools or the roles of people to do that with you, you can become a collaborative partner within a grant that another organization is applying for funding for. There's so much opportunity there. And all of these things are what make your grant proposals different and unique from everyone else. So it's more attractive to funders because you're thinking outside the box, so to speak.
Yeah, it really demonstrates a commitment to doing the work over your own organizational ego, right?
Yeah. I will add this. For those leaders who really want to dig into this, I found in my research that there are consultants that specialize in pay equity. And there's one that I'm going to reach out to. It'd be great to talk to her about her work. But there are people who specialize in this. So you're not in this alone. But as Rebecca highlighted when she did just a really simple Google search, there are tools and there are templates and there are really simple procedures that you can adopt from a Google search to help you to begin to talk about this and look at it in your organization.
We're at 30 minutes, ladies. That was a great conversation.
I know.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for joining us, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.